Welcome to the 45th episode of The Smartest People in the Room. If you've been following this series, you understand what we are doing, shining a light on incredibly smart, accomplished people and sharing stories from their careers, lives, as well as anecdotes about their past, present, and future. Today, I am pleased to welcome two of the most well-connected and respected executives from their two segments of the musical universe. Both are wickedly smart and funny, and I promise you will love some of the stories that you're going to hear today. Before we get started, let me take care of a little bit of business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people and the amazing work they do day to day in the music industry. But the second reason is a bit more nuanced. Many of you know that I am a music industry headhunter. By definition and function, I help people connect with companies. In this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, say hello to your friends, and make some new ones. And ask questions of our speakers. We will try to address as many of those as possible along the way. And also, please make sure that your chat is set to address speakers and attendees, not just speakers. I want to thank our program sponsors for their support: First Horizon Bank, Bufkin Baker, Four Roses Bourbon, the Fairlane Hotel, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, Lightning 100, Tennessee Brew Works, Moo TV, Jive Printing, Project Music, and Cushmaster's brand of CBD products. Another Colorado product, mind you, G. With that said, let's get started. In today's host seat, we welcome Michael Jensen from Los Angeles. Michael is CEO and founder of Jensen Communications Incorporated. His core areas of expertise are music, entertainment, sustainability, clean energy, new media, technology, corporate initiatives, cause-related marketing, fine arts, progressive politics, education, crisis management, and major international events. Michael began his career as a journalist for the Knight Ridder Star News in Pasadena. He moved to Columbia Records in 1977, rising to the post of National Director of Tours and Special Projects, where he managed media for the entire roster, including Billy Joel, Journey, Toto, Santana, and Bruce Springsteen, among many others. Jensen Communications is unique to the entertainment community as it has represented the interests of Carlos Santana, Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and sometimes even Young, for decades plus. Michael and JCI have also contributed to many global recognized forward-thinking events and achievements, including entertainment liaise for President William Clinton's first inaugural in 1992, multiple projects for former Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev, including the launch of the Gorbachev Foundation in the US. Michael also was the co-creator of the State of the World Forum, handled media management for Billy Joel's historic 1987 tour of the Soviet Union, and guided photographic book deals for Michael Colopy's official biography for Mother Teresa and the Architects of Peace, among other high-profile events. Michael's received more than 70 awards, including 5 years of Reader's Poll Awards from Performance, and over 50 platinum gold record citations from the RIAA, and many civic and charitable commendations. He's a longtime social activist and supporter of nonprofit organizations, and sits on the board for Artists for a New South Africa, for whom he has a great honor of working alongside its friend and supporter, Archbishop Desmond Tutu. All of JCI's endeavors are driven by Michael's passionate commitment to creating intelligent, influential campaigns and building meaningful relationships, public recognition, and industry visibility for extraordinary individuals, companies, and initiatives making a difference in their specific realms and on the global stage. That's quite a career you've had there, Mr. Jensen. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
And joining Michael as today's special guest is my friend G. Brown. G has navigated the world's musical landscape for decades as a journalist and as a radio personality. He's contracted with the Denver Post for 26 years and was published in numerous national magazines, including Rolling Stone and National Lampoon. G has also covered music news and hosted and programmed for a myriad of Denver-based radio stations. He's the author of several books, including the award-winning Red Rocks, The Concert Years, Colorado Rock Chronicles, and the Telluride Bluegrass Festival, the first 40 years. He was the founding director of the Colorado Music Hall of Fame beginning in 2011, and then launched and now oversees the Colorado Music Experience, a nonprofit cultural and educational organization established to preserve the legacies of Colorado music. He's one of the coolest projects is a series of new coffee table books that chronicle all the amazing columns and record reviews he wrote year by year. This series is called On the Record. And let me tell you, these books are simply incredible. For any music fan will love them. They make great gifts, and I hope you will consider purchasing some of them as the proceeds go to the Colorado Music Experience, which is a 501c3 that supports Colorado music history. Please welcome these two amazing guests to the smartest people in the room. Take it away, Michael.
Gee, as I said, I don't know if I'm so. Oh, did we just lose G?
No, he's right
Uh-oh.
there.
Oh, I can't. Hey, G. Sorry, I lost you for a second. Going back to this other screen. Anyway, it's a great pleasure to be here. I've had the honor, the pleasure of being G. Brown's friend since 1977 when we first met at ironically, the Brown Palace Hotel in Denver, Colorado. And G has his home is also the Brown Palace. So we met, and then we met at a Boz Scaggs down to then left event that we were hosting and stuff. I wanted to also just recognize Deborah Newman, who I see is in here, who was one of the great artist development people at Columbia Records when I was there. And anyhow, we are, G and I are just have a long, fun relationship. We've done a lot of stuff on the planet, from traveling around the world to creating a couple of these stories that probably going to come across here. But G was one of the dean, well, I think he is the dean of rock critics of Colorado, and he's just a brilliant writer. And I am so happy that he has started this series of books. And I think that's probably a good way to start here, because also noting, I see John Iverson's name that popped up, because I think part of this started with John is a brilliant human being, also another good friend, but runs all of the web programs for Stereophile and Analog Planet and Hi-Fi. And we actually I can't even remember which show it was. I think it was Santana show at Red Rocks. And we had the good fortune of being at G's place. And I think part of the story emanates from that night when you took John down to your archives, G. So I think the first thing to do is to have you basically talk about, how you came up with the idea and, what it's basically been built into.
Well, thanks, Michael. We should preface this real quick. I'm very grateful for this opportunity. Thanks to Tom. But this smartest people in the room thing is a little disconcerting. I would posit that we are the luckiest people in the room.
Absolutely. And I forgot to say that, Tom. Thank you so much.
Maybe there was a modicum of intelligence involved in my career, but really it was just having the great fortune to meet so many great people and exist in a world based around my passion, which is music. So the On Record series, thank you very much. The genesis was when I was sniffing around for a new book project. People like John Iverson, several other friends, saw my photo archives that I had collected over the last decades, right? These were press materials. Yes, Michael.
I'm sorry, but I just noticed a comment that they're saying that you need to turn up your volume.
How do I do that? Hold on, everybody. Is that any better? I'll
Get
just,
closer.
okay,
David Gans wants you to get closer.
my life coach. All right, that's good. How are we? Is that better?
Yes.
We'll project. Okay, so the On Record series, the genesis was my photo archives, the press materials I had collected over the last however many decades. And John Iverson, several other friends said, gee, there's a book here. And I thought, you know, you're probably right, but I'm not sure that the 100 greatest press kits of all time coffee table book would have that much gravitas. So I started going through my writing. And I remember all the fun we had, Mikey, but it turns out I worked pretty hard as a writer. I did over 3,200 interviews in my time at the Post. That's a lot, but 3 a week for a long time, it just adds up. And I own that material. So it became apparent that this would be a way to tell the history of popular music from 1978 to 1998. I have the resources to do that. We've launched with the first 3 volumes of the series, 1978, 1984, and 1991. And I'm fiercely proud of it. They've already won some awards. I've got an incredible book team, the best editor, John Rizzi, and the best designer, Kate Glassner, that I've ever had the pleasure of working with. So that's it. I'm very humbled by all the.
And that's not just, I mean, this is not your first foray into publishing. I mean, you obviously have a couple of other books that have done incredibly well. I mean,
but they were Colorado centric, right? The history of Red Rocks, Telluride Bluegrass Festival, Colorado's Rock Chronicles is kind of an encyclopedia, if you will, of Colorado music. But On Record is national, if not international in scope. And I'm excited that it's comprehensive. It's not just the big stars, it's the one-hit wonders, it's country and jazz and R&B as well. Yeah, I think they function as reference books as well as high-end nostalgia. It's great to see people dive in and take that trip down memory lane. It's a time for that.
What made you think about, I mean, how did you come up with the ideas? I think that I've always been fascinated in terms of what your plan was to release these things, that you decided to do 78 first and then 84 and then 94. Is that right?
91 is volume
91, sorry.
And we've got the next 6 in the hopper ready to go off to the printer shortly. I'm writing volume 10 right now, which is 1983. We're hopscotching around. I didn't want a kid who was interested in, say, grunge to have to wait till I wrote 13 books till we got around to that year. So we launched it with 1978 just because that was the first year where I had the comprehensive materials to do a complete book, my first full year at the Denver Post. And it's also interesting, Michael, the time that we emerged in our respective careers, right? It's a little different now when people get their music from friends and social media and Spotify and YouTube, but we got to do it in a very interesting phase when the music industry, created, marketed, sold in the form of albums and CDs, and everyone from the artists to the record labels to us consumers bought into it. And that coincided roughly with a period in journalism where newspapers hired guys like me to write about music and trends, and we became kind of part of the marketing machine. Musicians recorded albums and toured to sell them, and the rock press, we started growing. We were part of the apparatus, publishing our interviews in the local newspapers, and the rest is hysteria, as we like to say. When we met, 1977, you were inventing tour publicity for the labels, right? It's a antiquated.
Well, it was a brand new thing, and give all due credit to Glenn Brunman and Judy Painter, who started the field. I came to work on the West Coast with David Budge and Gail Roberts, and started there. But no, I mean, it was the first real year of tour publicity. And at the time, it was myself, and then on the competitor side with Warner Brother Records was Heidi Ellen Robinson, who is brilliant, who ultimately ended up working with me as a VP after my Columbia years and her Warner Brother years. But it was a brand new field. I mean, just going back to put some, love for what Deborah Newman, who's on here as well too, was also AD, but Jonathan Caffino, I think, we were all there. I mean, it was really the first attempt for the record company and Columbia Records to interface with not only, the marketplace across the country, but also to help develop the artists that were out there. And, I think that was a first, in terms of coming along. I'm proud of what we did and where we, ended up. I mean, it certainly has given me a career. And like you said earlier, I don't know if I'm the smartest guy in the room, but, I consider myself to be one of the better consultants on the planet because I've done everything wrong at one point or another in my life. I just don't make the same mistake twice, I hope. So anyhow, but
let's talk about that, Michael. It's time
oh
for
yeah,
a couple of stories. Okay. One concerns Boz Scaggs. Michael, you allude to us meeting in 1977 when Boz was performing in Denver. The following year, he was playing Red Rocks. Okay, so Michael comes into town fresh with the company credit card, right? From Columbia Records.
can I get thrown in jail for? No, just kidding. It's like,
it's that type of
I think the statute of limitations is passed now.
So we go up to the Red Lion Inn, which was the hoity-toity restaurant outside of Boulder, where all the Boulder area rock stars and Boulder hangers-on frequented. Had a fantastic meal, having a good time with my new buddy, and we look at our watches, and it's 9:45. I think the show started at 7:30 at Red Rocks. Flip out, tear down Highway 93 to Red Rocks, pull up into the parking lot in the mountains right when the last notes are resonating off the sandstone walls. Run backstage with Michael's laminate, see Boz, go, Boz, great show, incredible. Got back in the car and went back to the Red Lion Inn. And it was instructive for both of us, I think. For me, I wanted to bail Michael out in the biggest way, but I couldn't make anything up. We didn't see the show. I didn't know how he was going to sell it back at corporate, but we just blew that one, buddy. but
it provided us with a good thing that anytime we needed an excuse or we wanted to plan an excuse, we just called it, let's go do a Boz.
Doing a Boz, but we didn't want to hang at the show. Exactly.
It's great, and I didn't get fired after that. So it's like
a story that reflects more poorly on me is regarding Ben. The same year, the following year, Billy Joel.
78, I think.
Yes, Billy Joel. Michael had broken his career with The Stranger, and he was coming back for what, 52nd Street, Mike?
No, actually it was 79 then, wouldn't that be? Or no, 77, no, 78. Sorry, lost track.
Late 70s, anyway.
Just a quick preface to that, because you were there that night too, but it was Mackey Auditorium, and I think that's how my career, Tom, that's how my career started, was at Columbia. I had the good fortune when I came there, they gave me a list. They said, who do you want to work with? And I said, Billy Joel and Journey and Toto and Santana. And I started working. I had already met my very near, dear, late departed friend, Jeff Schock, who was the tour manager at the time, and ended up being in Colorado. And The Stranger had just come out. They had put Anthony's song out first, and I was at Mackey for the show, and remember very clearly being in the audience and watching women literally rush the stage for Just the Way You Are. And remember picking up the phone and calling Bill Freston and Glenn Brunman and saying, you know what, we're on the wrong single. And it's like Just the Way You Are is really, I mean, you should see the audience reaction here. So that's how it, you know, fond memories of Billy. I mean, both his time, he used to start his rehearsals in Salt Lake City. And then we ultimately ended up basically doing Denver, Salt Lake City material. And that kind of bled. I think that year I thought, oh, great idea. I'm going to call my friend G Brown. And I said, G, would you be pissed off if I brought a bunch of journalists to Colorado to do a little kind of mini press dialogue? And it was G and Pete Opple from the Dallas Morning News and Patrick McDonnell, I think, from the Seattle Times. And there were, what are there, like 6 or 7 of everybody that we had there?
Yeah, it was almost double figures. The idea being that instead of Billy having to do separate interviews with all of us ink-stained wretches, that getting us here collectively on the opening night of the tour, Billy would hold court, a little informal press conference, and everyone would get what they wanted, and a very good idea in theory. So everyone flies in the afternoon of the first night of the tour. We're in Billy's hotel room. He holds court. Billy's a hysterical guy, and he got to show off.
This was the Stofers next to the old airport, or McCarran, right?
Yeah. So Stapleton. Actually.
Stapleton. Sorry.
So we go to the show that night. Afterwards, we're all told to go backstage, and when we do, everyone has kind of got a stoic expression. They said Billy and his then wife Elizabeth had a fight. Elizabeth also his manager, and to just go back to the hotel room and we'll sort things out there. So we go to the hotel, and Billy's already there, and he's halfway through a bottle of Jose Cuervo, and Billy was pretty amazing. He was going around with the bottle, and he said to all the writers, you know, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking you're going to get to write about me being drunk, and you are, but you're going to get drunk with me. And he went around going, asshole meter, asshole meter, asshole meter, and lock in on every writer, pour him a shot, and make him do it with him. So things escalate from there. At one point, Billy is hissing off the balcony of his hotel room into the parking lot, doing his Ricardo Montalban impersonation, rich Corinthian letters. And he, at one point, is talking to someone about his band, and he pounds the hotel room wall behind him. They're the best damn band ever. And hits a framed painting, breaks the glass, and cuts his hand. Just a flesh wound, but all the bigwigs from Columbia are there, and they immediately swarm on him. Oh, Billy, we'll cancel the tour. What do we do? And Billy goes into his pansy routine. Ooh, I hit my widow hand. Ooh. So this is pretty ridiculous at this point. One of Billy's roadies walks by me and says, so where are you in from? I said, well, I'm the hometown boy. I'm here in Denver. And he says, oh, Broncos. Because at that point, my Broncos were doing really well. Just gone to their first Super Bowl. And I said, yeah, Broncos. And at that moment, Billy's walking by, and he turns and says, Raiders. And I pride myself on being quick on my feet, so I immediately retorted, Broncos. And Billy, being equally quick, Raiders. We might have gone back one more time, and then we just shrugged our shoulders, grabbed each other by the throat, and started throttling each other, rolling around on the floor in the middle of this big party. And the highlight of my career, arguably, is seeing the look on my friend Michael Jensen's face as he broke away from the conversation he was engaged in to turn around and see his new superstar act and the local idiot from the newspaper doing their best all-star wrestling impersonation for everybody. So I love a happy ending. Years later, I talked to Billy about it, and he said that he wasn't into the Raiders anymore because they had moved to LA. That was a little white wine and cheese for him, but I was still a Broncos fan. So, I guess I won that one. I didn't have to use my size and intellectual advantage to defeat him. I just let Father Time take care of that. Thanks for
I think the point is that you can have a really good career, but you can also have some fun. So,
thanks for indulging me on that one.
uh,
We were
that's
on
great.
to the races.
So I wanted to talk about because you've done 3,000 plus interviews. I'm just curious in terms of going back through the archives. I mean, obviously there's a ton of product that was being released each one of those years and stuff. How did you choose each one of the actual pages in the book?
Going through things, cross-referencing with charting information, used Billboard to see who had a best-selling record that year. From my trove of interviews, I'm really blessed that I covered music as a beat for a newspaper. I think that's an interesting subset to things. I was not writing for a magazine where I was pitching what I liked or being assigned something. I covered everything. Everything in the clubs, everything in the arenas, everything in between, and all different genres of music, from folk to punk to heavy metal. And so drawing on that too, to get a breadth of who should be represented in a given year. There's always a lot going on. I would hate for these books to be categorized as only about the biggest things that were going on in 1978, what is now known as the classic rock era. They're all in there. Tom, you might want to put up Journey for everyone to see. This is a spread out of the book for Steve Perry and Company, and all their ilk, the corporate rock icons, as it were. But we got everything else in there, from Pere Ubu, the nascent new wave acts, all the punkers from the Clash and Blondie making their first records. So again, very proud of the comprehensive nature of this. It's fun to see Journey here. This was a big deal for you, particularly, Michael. You broke the band. I remember our bus ride from Casper, Wyoming, where they played in a converted barn where they hadn't cleaned out the stalls, and they played, ankle deep in manure, basically, and then got on the bus, rode down, got altered with Ainsley Dunbar, the drummer, and got pulled into Boulder, where they opened for the Rolling Stones. It was, I think everyone kind of got whiplash on that particular date.
And then they proceeded to get on a plane after that and went to Amsterdam to play over there. Herbie Herbert, who was the manager at the time, I remember remarking, I said, what'd you do? Get a map of the world and take a dartboard out, or I take a dart and start throwing it around for these guys to go. But yeah, that was an interesting trip, to say the least. It's funny, I just got off the phone with Greg Raleigh. I'm helping, just about to do something. I mean, Neil's remained a really dear friend, and it's it's great to see that their career and what started back then has turned into one of the great franchises of all time. And it's nice to know that you can still have a career in this industry, because I think that it's interesting, and I know G wanted to talk about this a little bit, but how you used to get your, music used to be curated, music used to be found. I mean, you could go into a record store and it was a very tactile experience. I mean, I'm still glad for the independents that are out there, but, I miss, the joy of discovering music through the written word and radio, and being able to do it. I mean, now everything is social, but why don't you talk a little bit about that? Because it's like a far cry from when you started at the Arvada Citizen, So, I mean,
it was,
that's it.
I term it the shared experience. It's what we lack now. Everyone's listening on their earbuds to whatever playlist they've programmed. There's no input. There were flaws in the old system when major labels ran the show. It was the people that couldn't navigate that got lost in the shuffle, but at least we got to, buy the same records and hear the same songs on the radio and have a sense of real community there. I never really subscribed to the rock critic thing. I was obviously tagged with that appellation, but I always wanted to be more of a reporter. The critic thing was just kind of a dead end. If that's what you aspired to do, you could do that for your college newspaper, basically writing comedy in a record review, and that's the extent of it. But I wanted to know what made people tick. And with Journey, they kind of set me on that path early on. A band of that magnitude, they getting to talk to Steve Perry, and he tells me, he had that soaring tenor that was unlike anything else, and asked him about it, and he said it was hot sauce, and that wasn't dry ice that you were seeing up on stage either. So that kind of insight, really resonated with me. That was better than anything I could come up with on my own. Journey played a role in maybe that bigger picture you're talking about, Michael, as far as being a critic. I was invited to participate in the Paz and Jop poll at the Village Voice back in New York. Robert Christgau did this poll of rock critics for their favorite albums of the year. And I enjoyed that stuff. I mean, I was into all kinds of music, including what was going on back east, but I hated the exclusivity of it, that those guys only voted for whoever was wearing black nail polish in the club downtown, and paying no attention to anything east of the Hudson, is the favorite poster illustrated at the time. So they asked me to vote, and I voted for Journey because they were what was happening out here in Colorado and in the Midwest in its entirety. Bands like Foreigner, and I was never much of a Styx fan, but REO Speedwagon and all that stuff. So it was happening. So I wanted them represented in my vote, and they never asked me to vote again. Basically, I was out instead of getting to make my point. So interesting stuff there, but Journey was the trigger for that happening.
I think it's kind of weird and ironic and wonderful at the end of the day, though, that it's like what is, makes me feel good at the end of the day, is that, and Deborah Newman just wrote this note saying, who's the singer? It's obviously Arnel Pineda, who's done a wonderful job. Steve at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, when I was there, when they were getting inducted, gave great credit to that. But, it's interesting that it's like, we're 43 years later. And within the last 5 years, I mean, 2 of the Journey songs are, part of the soundtrack of our lives. I mean, they just get continually played. And I think that's, not to draw the comparison to specifically to 1978, 77, with the book. But, at the end of the day, this really does capture history to see how much the music of that period still has impact today.
Absolutely.
So, I think that is great.
Tom, can you put up Springsteen? We'll stay in 1978 for a moment. This is Bruce in that year with Darkness on the Edge of Town. A little story, if I may. I'm coming out to Los Angeles to see Michael and other publicists try to drum up some story ideas. I'm fresh out of college, absolutely broke. And I write about this in the introduction of 1978. I don't, my last day there, I'm broke. Like fresh out of college broke, don't have money for cab fare to get over to Century City in the CBS building. So I decide to hike, I'm young, fast, scientific. I start hoofing the 6 miles to get over there. And I'm about 2/3 of the way, and I see this guy coming at me, the only other person I've encountered my entire walk. And he looks a lot like Bruce Springsteen. So he gets a little closer and, looks a lot like Bruce Springsteen. So I said, Bruce, and he goes, hey, how you doing? This is when he had just been a few years removed from being on the cover of Time and Newsweek, hadn't become Born in the USA superstar yet, but still a big deal. And, I always had the rule, the unwritten rule that you don't accost someone in public or when it's not set up. You don't want to impose on their time. They're entitled to their privacy. But I just asked him what he was doing out there. He said he was out there doing some mixes for his next record. And, I wished him well. And he did same and took off. And I always, I'm pretty sure that encounter didn't mean as much to him as it meant to me. But I always harbored the desire that he would name his next album Born to Walk. But it ended up being Darkness on the Edge of Town. So that was an early encounter with the boss.
And do you, like, with each one of these books that you've published now for the three, I mean, obviously you've got stories out the wazoo for everybody that you've talked to and stuff. Is there another, I mean, from the other two books, is there anything that pops to mind that's a fun story about how you've recognized them, but at the same time you've interacted with?
I'll lead into a couple of things. I was really fortunate being the critic, if you will, out here in the Mountain Time Zone. There were other writers at other papers, but I wasn't in the middle of the LA or New York scene, right? Much more competitive, take things a little slower out here. I was always happy for that. But I got to tap into two things. One I'll get to later, which was the radio market that was very unique here in Denver. But the second was Red Rocks Amphitheater, arguably the most important and famous outdoor venue in rock history. It's been around a lot longer than rock and roll, but an amazing place. If anyone's ever been there, they know exactly of what I speak. And Tom, if you'll put up the next one, in 1984, this is U2, the Unforgettable Fire. The year before, the band had played at Red Rocks. They had come through Denver a couple times previous and really set me and the Denver market on fire. They were just undeniable. And they were taken up to Red Rocks to see it, and they vowed that they would play there someday. They ended up soaking every nickel they had to film their performance on June 5th, 1983. And they flew in Steve Lillywhite, their producer, and The Tube was the British video show of the time, their director, pulling out every stop to film this concert. And the night of the show, you wouldn't have put a dog out in it. The weather was just ridiculous. Bono got on the phone asking everyone to come to the show. They do a free one the following night at an indoor venue, but they had to get some footage while they were up there, and please come. And about 6,000 people braved the elements. The Edge always said he wanted to give credit to the wide angle lens because it made the crowd look a lot bigger than it really was that night. But they put on the performance of a lifetime. They actually turned the weather to their advantage. The whole place looked like a Scottish moor, and they lit bonfires, and Bono's waving the white flag, and it ended up being a very famous video, Under a Blood Red Sky, and it introduced not only U2, but Red Rocks to the entire world, Europe, everywhere else. And I was, again, right place, right time, no great doing on my own. I wanted to stay home, take in the free show the next night, but I drug myself up there, was the only writer on premises, and came up with some lame opening line like of my review, overnight review, writing on a deadline. But so much had to go wrong for the U2 show to be so right. And that hoary cliche got picked up ever since in everything ever written about the band and that particular show. So a great memory there.
I think right around that time too, I actually was handling Steve Miller, and he was releasing Italian X-rays. And my one Bono experience in life has been, we were doing a television special called Rock Palace in Germany, and we were in Lorelei, and we were in the hotel, and every morning Bono, we'd all be eating breakfast downstairs, and Bono would come down, and all he would say was, "It's a great day for Ireland." And it's like, okay, sure it is. But what an amazing human being he is. So.
And the Red Rocks thing, we've been there so many times together, Michael. Just a quick sidebar, a very memorable show was Jackson Brown,
Absolutely.
Steve Earle. We're up there, and a storm was moving in, and it's just amazing. You can just smell the ozone, everything shifting atmospherically up there. It's just a transcendent experience to be up there in God's country. But it was a lightning storm, and a bolt hit the power grid down in the town of Morrison below and wiped out everything. There was people shouting from the stage in the middle of this torrential downpour, "Go home, we'll figure this out." But they couldn't even address the crowd through the PA. And my favorite memory of the whole experience was Jackson Brown, Mr. Mello, right? They're down in the dressing rooms, which are subterranean at Red Rocks to a degree. And he's saying, well, one of the roadies, it's his birthday, so we're just gonna, play a little music and have some cake. And the production people are coming and saying, "You don't get it. We're on emergency generator power here. In 15 minutes, when it runs out, you're not going to be able to see the hand in front of your face. You got to get the heck out of here." And we did. And but just the
Yeah, I think Jackson wanted to do, because we had a special VIP group that was there that night, and I remember Jackson saying, "I want to do a concert for them down here," and Jackson's tour manager saying, "Well, not unless you want to get electrocuted." So
not the place to be. But
that night, I have never smelled ozone so good, because we were standing up on top of Red Rocks. God, that was an amazing night. But then that torrential downpour that happened, it was unreal. See, that's the thing that you need to do, G, next time on some of these books, is you need to expand on some of these other story opportunities and just get us all in trouble.
Sure, that's good coaching, Mike.
Yeah,
Tom, is there what's next in 1984? Huey. I just wanted to show him. I've been lucky, there's that. As a journalist, I got my degree in journalism from the University of Colorado in Boulder, and I try to honor the rules of journalism. And one is not getting too close to your subjects in terms of maintaining your objectivity, but there's people that you're just going to enjoy. It's a fellow human being. Huey has been a lifelong friend ever since we met back in the early 80s, before he became famous. We bonded immediately over sports and sick jokes being way more important than music. So fast forward a couple years to 1984, when sports comes out, and for a moment, Huey was the hottest thing on the planet, between Madonna and Cyndi Lauper and all the other MTV stars of that era. Huey was it, to the point where he couldn't leave his hotel room. They played Red Rocks for 4 consecutive nights, first and still only group to ever do that. And he couldn't leave. And to be able to witness fame through that prism, I was always grateful just for that bird's eye view of what it entails. Everyone thinks that that's the best time of a performer's life, when they're on top of the charts and on top of the world. And it's probably when they're their most miserable. They can't live a normal life by any means. And Huey's a dear friend of this day. You might know that he's undergone a hearing loss, had to pull the plug on his career. He's still busy with a lot of other projects, but a singer who can't sing is kind of a sad thing, but he is a wonderful friend and a great guy. And you
Indeed.
wanted to do his publicity, Michael. Sorry I couldn't pull that off for you.
Well, he's a great guy. And I love the fact that you get that is one of your closer relationships that you've created. And
That's for sure.
yeah.
If we cycle back, I just want to rip through these for folks. The next panel from the book is from 1991. These are the last couple here, but yeah, that's the cover of 1991. Thank you for that, Tom. But Joe Walsh here, this is when he ran for vice president against Dan Quayle. At the time, he thought that was easier than running against Bush. So he launched his everyman kind of campaign. Joe's just a nut, his ordinary average guy campaign. But I owe Joe a lot. If I can hold court for a second, I promise there's a point to be made of all this. But Michael, you alluded earlier to my start at the Arvada Citizen, Arvada, a suburb of Denver. That was a little suburban paper. I'm 15 years old. It's apparent that I'm not even going to be able to join my junior high school band Python Deity, much less be playing up at Red Rocks anytime soon. So I'm going to channel my passion for music into writing about it. And I ride my bike down to the offices of the Arvada Citizen. The editor there, 22-year-old Mark Wolf, who went on to have a wonderful career in this market as a newspaperman covering sports and city-side news. But Mark was fresh out of college. I handed him this horrible column. It was something that I had read in Stereo Review, that you could actually wash your dirty vinyl records with mild detergent and warm water and dry them if they were dirty. I don't even know what I was thinking. He must have cringed, but he liked having some young charge sit at the foot of his desk while he could tell his stories about the Yardbirds playing his senior prom back in Illinois, right? So back then, if you're published, if you have clips, you're a writer, right? That was your cachet. He let me start reviewing records and doing little things, and I parlayed that into my very first interview with Burton Cummings of the Guess Who. They're playing the Denver Coliseum behind the American Woman album. And these guys were favorites. I thought Burton was a god, the best voice in rock at the time. And I go down there in my 8th grade brown wool graduation suit in the middle of July, orange shirt and tie. And I'm here for the interview. And I'm sure Burton must have taken the tour manager aside and said, who the hell set this up? But God bless him, he did the interview. He picked his toes the entire time, which was instructive. I had yet to go to journalism school, and that sure helped with the demystification of the rock star. Lesson 1, don't ask him about the Middle East. You don't need to. Let's stick to music, right? And so then I took that and parlayed it into an interview with a guy named Joe Walsh, who had just moved to Boulder County from Cleveland, Ohio, where he had broken up the James Gang. He had woodshedded for a year, writing material, doing ham radio up in the mountains, and was going to debut his new band Barnstorm at a little bar club down on Colfax Avenue in Denver. So I show up for that one, wore a t-shirt this time. I learned my lesson. But I go into the bar and say, I'm here for the interview. It's 4 p.m. They won't let me in. They say, you can't be in here, kid. And they were right. I was obviously and woefully underage. So I said, well, if you'll tell Mr. Walsh that I was here, I'd appreciate it. Went back to the car, my Dodge Dart, and kicked the floorboard, wondering what to do. Never been in this situation. Was getting ready to take off and lick my wounds, and the door to the club opens up, and Joe Walsh sticks his head out. I'm the only car in the parking lot. He comes walking out, gets in the passenger side, and proceeds to talk to me for an hour and 20 minutes, pouring his heart out about what it meant to be in Colorado, and why he had left the James Gang and everything else. And I've always reflected, we talk about being lucky at the beginning of this webinar. At that age, when you're shut down for whatever reason, it destroys you, right? You take it personally, you can't see beyond what's just happened to you. It's the most awful thing that can happen. If you're encouraged, you're on fire, right? And I got that gift from Burton Cummings and Joe Walsh. They talked to me, and I decided at that point, I'm going to interview everybody in the entire world. And I almost got to. I owe them just about everything as far as what I was able to accomplish in my career.
And a brilliant one it has been so far. Unfortunately, I don't have the best Joe Walsh story, so I'll leave that one alone.
Those, he always treated me aces. Years later, not that many years later, but a story about being a newspaper man. One of the little secrets of the trade, at the end of the year, the industry would shut down, right? No one on tour for the holidays, no new releases. Everybody put their product out in the fall and marketed it for Christmas, and then nothing was released until January. So for us writers, what we did, you did lists, right? The best albums of the year, the best singles of the year, the best concerts of the year, the best backstage catering of the, you just emptied the bucket, right? To wait until that first new release or first concert came through town in January. And I had almost gotten there, but it was a week before I had a column due, and I didn't feel I could bail. I was, trying to earn my keep at the paper. So I did what any self-respecting journalist would do in the great Hemingway tradition and headed to a local bar, right? And I walk in, and there's Joe with a friend. And this is 1979, I want to say. And again, I had that rule. You don't, impose on someone, in their personal time. But I had a deadline. I didn't have anything to write about. So I just, Joe, good to see you back in town. Don't want to bother you, but just thanks for treating me aces over the year. Oh, come on, sit down, right? This is at a time when he was with the Eagles, and Irving Azoff, their manager, had declared a moratorium on interviews, right? We don't talk to the press. They were feuding with Rolling Stone, whatever was going on, but you don't talk to them. And here I am talking with a Joe who's pouring his heart out about this new record they're recording, and all the intricacies involved in that. Turned out to be The Long Run, their follow-up to Hotel California, the album that actually broke the band up after that. But I go from having absolutely nothing to write about to having a worldwide exclusive, thanks to just running into Joe in the local bar. I owe Joe a lot.
I think that it's testimony to the fact that it's like, what you had said, it's like having a little bit of luck, but it's also, being at the right place at the right time in terms of what's going on. But then there are those moments, G, that it's like, I think that testimony to your career and your writing is one of a guy that I worked with for a long, long time until he broke up the band, is David Crosby. And I think that story of what you did is well worth the price of admission. I think you ought to talk about that for a second.
Are you talking about the
Huntsville prison?
Oh, yeah, that was a wow.
That's when they let you out of prison, G. So
I hadn't considered that, but David had his problems back in the 80s, obviously, well documented. He was going to be the great rock and roll casualty of all time. He had performed at the Blue Note when he was in the greatest throes of his drug addiction, and it was such a sad sight. It's the middle of summer. He's wearing a down parka and playing a song or two, and then walking off stage out the back, getting on the tour bus so he could take a hit off the pipe. Open sores on his face. I'm not talking out of school here. David would be the first one to relate this to you. So he was in bad shape. He was eventually incarcerated down in Texas. And when he got out, he was flying home and he flew through Denver. That's where his connecting flight was. And there was a layover, and we sat down on the concourse. There weren't any chairs, just sat on the floor, carpeted floor. And I got the first interview with him upon his release, which was an amazing thing. I never ascribed it to anything on my part. I think that, it's just part of your 12 steps of recovery, whatever, you talk about it. And I was the first guy in the line of fire. I was just lucky that his flight landed in Denver, and I was aware of it, and they reached out. So that was a great thing to be able to tell his story of recovery for the first time.
It was a really good story. Tom, you pointed out that Michelle had shocked and wonderful human being as well. What's the question? I can't find it. That's to confuse our host.
No worries, I'll read it for you. Michelle Schacht is a good friend of many on here. Her question is question for G. Music journalists were early casualties of disruption in the digital economy, yet recent catalog valuations make headlines. Do you feel like you've had a good run, or are you still engaged in grassroots efforts to sustain the real value of independence and creativity?
Hi, Michelle. Michelle, someone else who I had the privilege of writing about over the years. She was always gracious with her time. Thanks for that. Yeah, I've kind of had to find my own path, not just newspapers specifically, but journalism in general, and rock journalism. It just doesn't exist right now. I still champion those values you allude to, Michelle. Personally, trying to do it through my nonprofit that I formed, Colorado Music Experience. This is a repository for Colorado music history. I confess, as we build this thing, it's pretty 20th century centric. I want to get up to current day people who are making their history right now, but I'm dedicated to getting the history down of all the standing on the shoulders of giants, as it were, right? There were a lot here in Colorado who I want to make sure get there too. I noticed that my friends Molly O'Brien and Rich Moore are part of the audience. And, we're going to get around to folks like them. Just so much important work has been done here in Colorado, and it's interesting. Legacies, it used to take a generation for them to get lost if they weren't tended to. Now it just takes an hour if you're not posting something repeatedly. So I'm trying. I don't know if I'm answering your question, Michelle, but I sure cherish those values, and you keep fighting the good fight.
I want to give a quick shout out too to one of the smartest guys on here is Dick Wingate, who I got recently reconnected with, and it's great to see him. And Henry Root, it's like lovely to see you on here. And my brother from another mother, Kelly Harris. So I really appreciate people showing up for this. Hopefully we haven't dumbed you down too much.
Or the pants off you. Oh, excuse the pants.
Also, I see Barry Ullman. There he is.
One other thing I guess I wanted to mention, I alluded to it earlier, Red Rocks being one thing that I could lean on here in the Colorado market. The other was KBCO, the radio market in general here, a station called KTCL I throw in there. Denver was a great radio market. KBCO invented the AAA format, the adult alternative radio format. It has no relation to the current iHeartRadio model. This is back when they were giving exposure to artists like Lyle Lovett and Sean Colvin and Bruce Hornsby, on, people that weren't getting traditional classic rock or top 40 airplay. And to be able to write about those artists, those incredible artists, and people knew who I was talking about, were familiar with their music through that exposure, instead of me just flailing away with words trying to describe their artistry. Really gave me a leg up. Really blessed to be in a music community where that stuff resonated with so many people.
Is there, do you think there's any specific questions, or G, is there anything that you would like to discuss?
Boy, that's everybody's favorite question to end an interview with, isn't it? What did we cover? I would throw out also, people are always asking, it's funny, and when I speak at schools or universities, colleges, grade schools, I give my literacy rap and talk about my career, and then they always ask, how much are you rich, basically, which is the furthest thing from the truth. But
in spirit.
But the one other formative thing in my career that doesn't exist now, sadly, so I just want to pass it on. I got to work at a club called Tulagi while I was attending college up in Boulder in the years right before I met you, Michael. This was a nightclub and was ground zero for live music in Colorado. The Eagles played there, Linda Ronstadt, ZZ Top, Doobie Brothers, all on their way up. I mean, we're talking just a room for a couple of hundred people. But it was an interesting time in that bands could stay at the University Inn for $9 a night, right? So that allowed them, it wasn't today's circus, or for the last couple of decades, the band, you come into town, you play, you're off to the next one, tour routing. But back then, they would be booked for 5-night engagements, Tuesday through Saturday. They'd play on a Tuesday night. The club would be half empty, depending on who it was. But then by Friday, the review had appeared in the campus paper, and word of mouth had spread, and sold out shows. Lather, rinse, repeat, like it said on the shampoo bottles. But for a young writer to have that access to musicians, to see what made them tick, right? They had nothing else to do. Boulder was a lot smaller place back then. And to, be able to hang out, not just with those soon-to-be stars that I mentioned, but Tulagi booked the great blues artists. I saw Willie Dixon and Muddy Waters and Lightning Hopkins there. There was comedy. Steve Martin played there before he was even on Saturday Night Live. No one knew who he was. He was fresh out of Knott's Berry Farm, right? Hitting the road. All the great country artists. For this kid from Arvada to see Earl Scruggs play the banjo and go, oh, something else is going on here. It was just an amazing education. And boy, again, I'll end it the way we started it. Luckiest boy in the room, okay?
I second that emotion. So I also wanted to say, Larry Butler, it's so good to see your name.
Wow.
I can't believe you're here. I hope that we get to catch up at some point. So
yeah, everybody, the industry side of it, Michael, I allude to radio. I was blessed to be in a market where there were radio reps back in the day. They had your job, right? But the local guys who worked records at the radio stations, they were all music fans at their core. They weren't corporate shills. There were exceptions, but all of them, to my experience, always included me in that. They weren't paid to have the writer from the paper tag along to whatever events they were doing, but they always included me. Guys like Greg Pfeiffer, who I think might be on here.
it's one of the best.
Yeah, I owe it to those guys too. So anyway, I'm glad to sneak that in. Thank you.
That's great. Also, I just wanted to say, Lisa Jenkins, I hope you bring your business back with us.
Hey,
So,
Michael, I've got a good question here from a Ron Bostwick in the
Ron.
Q&A, and this is a question for both you and G. And here it is, quote, with all your individual experiences around the emotional connection of music, how do you view the future of music? And if that emotional connection is still as strong, for instance, why don't we have the connection we got from protest songs of the 60s? So that's one for both of you.
You go first, Michael.
you know, the music industry is a much different place, obviously, before we started in it. You know, there's pros and cons with everything, and you know, life changes. I mean, shift happens, and music is, you know, the touch point of everybody. You know, you remember things through music. In terms of the future of, I mean, if I understand the question correctly, it's like, I'm sorry, just hit the refresh button on that, Tom. It's like, what's the future of?
Yeah, is the emotional connection as strong today as it was back in the 60s when we had protest songs?
I don't think so, but then again, I could be wrong. I mean, it's like, I think that as you get older, you know, adult attention deficit disorder happens, you know, in terms of, you know, having a musical connection to the current musical scene. Look, I love a lot of it. There's a lot of it I can't stand, but you know, life goes on. I don't know, living in the social world that we live in now, and the TikTok world, you know, and the Twitter world, where everything has been reduced to whatever 140 characters, you know, it's like, I don't know how you create an emotional reaction to it. It just seems very fleeting, but that's just me. Gee, you might disagree.
Well, it's not a matter of disagreeing. There's a window in everybody's life where music is everything to it. That's your high school or college years, just to round off, right? You've got the spare time, the disposable income, whatever, to invest in music. I think it's a mistake to paint everyone with the same brush just because currently we lack the context. Okay, I'm with you, Michael and Ron. Music will never mean as much as it did back for us. The protest songs, or whatever, music was a part of the fabric of society. But a 20-year-old today doesn't have that context. I think that whatever they're streaming or downloading, you know, and soundbite they're listening to on The Voice or whatever means just as much. They cherish it. It's just not in the same context. The music business will continue to shift and change, but there'll always be music.
You know, I had this conversation with a friend not too long ago, but it's like, can anybody that's listening can name the last 5 winners of American Idol? Can you name 5 winners of The Voice in the last 5 years? I mean, it's like we live in a disposable world, and that's a shame. And it's like, that's the reason when I started in the beginning of this, you know, I hope that we can find some connection to bands in the future that gives you that emotional connection that you want you to go. It's, I mean, right now, if you want to get a connection with somebody, you got to go find it. You know, you've got to sit there and dig through Google and YouTube, and then it's just a, you know, there's something for curation from professionals, you know. So but
Harder to find, you're right, but
it's there. No, I grant it, absolutely, it's there. But
it is there. There's as good music being made today as ever. You allude to the reality show stuff, Michael. I just wrote a piece for History Colorado, our local Colorado History Museum, and
Gee, speak up, please.
they wanted to project on what the future holds, right from the perspective of 100 years from now. And my prediction is the next reality show is Last Man Singing, where the producers of The Voice and the producers of Rollerball get together and the competitors try to maim the competition while they're singing and eliminate them that way. And
Great. And then they have to wear masks while they're at it.
yeah,
So
I hadn't thought of that part. Very good.
anyway, anybody have any other questions? I think that we've bored our audience enough. So
We actually are a few minutes over time, gentlemen. So if you don't mind, let me jump in here and wrap up. And first, let me say to Michael, thank you for hosting. It's been a pleasure to hearing your stories, and especially the relationship between you and G. And G, Lord, what a treasure you are. And I'm so glad to have had you on this program. I hope people took note of your books and the ability to purchase those, and the fact that a significant portion of the proceeds go to a nonprofit. So that's coloradomusicexperience.org, I believe.
Colomusic.org.
Yeah, colomusic.org, ladies and gentlemen in the audience, please check that out. You can purchase his books, and a lot of the monies for that go to this organization. So
All of it.
all of it,
Yeah.
even better.
Fundraising.
With that, on behalf of the audience, thank you to you gentlemen. Thank you to the audience. Let me say one final time, be nice to everyone, wear a mask, and come back tomorrow for our last program of the year at 1 p.m. Central Time tomorrow, featuring Ralph Simon and Lee Trink. Look forward to
be
seeing
back.
you all there.
that's great, Tom. Love Ralph, by the way. Congratulations on getting him.
Thank you. He's another treasure.
He is indeed. All right.
Thank
Thank you,
folks.
everybody.
Take care.